Hi, everyone, and welcome to this new episode of Explicitly Pro-Life. I'm Kristan Hawkins, and with me today in his own studio is Josh Brahm.
Hey!
With Equal Rights Institute. Josh is the founder and president and probably head custodian.
All of that. I do all the things.
Head HR
That's
rep
not true.
at Equal Rights Institute. And he actually has an incredible team. Rachel's
awesome.
Rachel was one of the students for life leaders at the University of Michigan's here. I just saw her. She was on the phone.
Fantastic students for life leader.
You actually, you're not just by yourself, unlike when it was me when I started Students for Life.
I kind of like to say we've assembled the pro-life Avengers over here. I've got all these really
smart. He was nerding out about the tech before this interview started, and now he's going about the Avengers.
Can't take the nerd out of the pro-life leader.
Now he's self-proclaimed himself a nerd. Okay, so let's ask the self-proclaimed pro-life nerd some questions.
Okay.
So you're the pro-life apologist. You're the one who likes to sit and think deep thoughts about how to respond to people.
All day
long. And so it's really funny because I go on campuses and I'm like, I know what I'm saying is probably not what Josh Brahm wants to hear. And I know when he listens to this, he's probably cringing and going, no, Kristan, no, why did you do that? And it's like, because it's the only thing that came to my mind at the time. And, you know, the thing is, it gets better.
We're all doing our best.
Yeah, we all do our best and it gets better.
I know that I've succeeded when I am in your head, though. When you have WWJD
you're definitely in my head. Look, I'm
in your head, that's hilarious to me.
I know he's not going to like this answer. Okay, so, and Josh is really good at telling everybody what he doesn't like. That's like your shtick in the pro-life movement. You have like even like your like videos on Insta and stuff. It's like what not to do as a pro-lifer. Your fundraising must just be taking off when you're like, they're all idiots. Give us money.
I try not to say they're all idiots, but there are certainly, let's say, fringe elements of the pro-life movement that can be kind of weird.
Well, you definitely allude to that fact.
And there are arguments that are more persuasive than others.
There you go.
And so I want to help us to get better. But I'm getting slowly more diplomatic as I grow older than I used to be.
Yes. So, okay, we all are. But so I have you just for this podcast. We don't actually even have a script or agenda for this one or an outline because I didn't write one. But I thought since I have you, I might ask you some of the top questions that I get on campuses a lot or that I've heard. And just see how you'd respond to them.
Yeah, sure.
And then in my head, I might go back and go, oh, maybe I was really off on that. But let's start with like some of the top ones that we get. The one that I'm getting on every time I speak somewhere, and even our team's getting a lot when we're doing our tours, is the question of suffering. I know I'm like starting this off like super theological.
No, talk about it.
But it's, isn't it better for you to just abort that baby than to bring that child into a life where they're going to be stuck in a crappy, failing foster care system, where they're going to be abused by their abusive parents, where they're going to suffer from whatever disease that they've been diagnosed in the womb with? Isn't it better? And how dare you tell a woman she shouldn't choose abortion when she's doing the loving, caring thing?
Yeah. So what I would want to do is I would want to start by finding really genuine common ground because we agree on their concern. Like it's not like pro-choice people are the only ones that care about abused kids, right? So we got to really show that. So I want to say like I am so with you. None of us want to see children abused. You're right. The foster care system has all kinds of problems. There are some good people that adopt foster kids. There are also some bad people that adopt foster kids. And I would just love it if foster care wasn't even a thing. I would love it if the church really stepped up and adopted all the foster kids into loving homes. No one wants to see
kids
that are abused. Which, by the way,
could actually happen. Yeah. There's 100,000 kids in foster care who are waiting to be adopted. There's about 400,000 in foster care, but 100 of those 1,000 are waiting to be adopted.
Yeah.
If every church in America this Sunday just said, we'll take 2 of those kids.
Yeah. I've heard a story. I don't know if this is true because I haven't been able to find like the original story, but I've heard this legend, and even if it's a legend, this amazing story of a mega church with a pastor who had worked out that their own city, there were fewer foster kids than the families in the church. And he basically did this one big motivational Sunday, and it is said that they basically abolished foster care in that city. They adopted every single foster kid in that city.
Up for adoption. Not all foster care children are for adoption. Yeah.
Right. The ones that were available. And so
I know Focus on the Family has done a concerted effort in Colorado, and I think of the status they've reduced I think it's like by 25% the numbers in foster care.
That's amazing.
By
so we
getting
should do
churches.
that.
Yeah. So
that's part of my answers. I'm going to start with that common ground. And pro-lifers need to not just do this in like one sentence. That's not enough. You have to kind of prove to them you really mean what you say.
I'm going to take notes.
And
I'm
so
not
you're going to talk
you.
about you're all right. She's tweeting over here now.
No, I'm not.
No, I know. I'm just kidding. So I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to trot out a toddler. And this is not an original ERI thing. Everyone trots out toddlers. We have kind of our own way of doing it, but I'm going to kind of say, let me ask you kind of a weird question. This might seem strange to you, but this will help, I think, you understand where I'm coming from, because we clearly both care about kids who are abused. I don't want to see anyone abused. But what's going on for me is like clearly neither of us would be okay with killing children who are already born that are being abused or in the foster care system or something like that. And so I think the difference between us is not do we care about children who are being abused. The difference is I have this view that you're probably going to think is kind of strange. I think that unborn embryos are morally equal to toddlers. I know, that sounds crazy, but that's what's going on for me. That's why I'm pro-life. You change my mind about that, I join your side, basically. And so because I think that thing, when you say child abuse or something like that, I don't instantly become pro-choice, because in my mind I'm thinking, would that be a good reason to kill toddlers? Because I think abortion is doing morally the same thing. It's just killing someone that is less developed. And so that's what's going on for me. So come back at me. What do you think is going wrong with my argument? And inevitably they're going to say, well, I disagree with you about that thing. I don't think that they're the same. And then we can talk about that.
And that's
awesome.
what the argument always comes down to, what is it, right? That's right. What, I think Scott Klusendorf has a quote about that. Like, I mean,
unless we're talking about bodily autonomy. Like I kind of like to say, like, there's these two big pillars of disagreement. There's one on personhood. That's the what is it thing. Then there's also bodily autonomy. And the way bodily autonomy arguments work is by their function, they are conceding personhood for sake of the argument. Doesn't mean they really think it's a person. They almost never do.
Sure.
I've met a couple of exceptions, but they're the rare exception. Usually they've got a dual argument going on.
Yeah.
And it's so important for pro-lifers to understand this, because we always think about the personhood thing. And it's like, look, in my view, the bodily rights thing is actually more core, more essential, foundational to their pro-choice beliefs. You've seen that. You've talked to these students. They care more about that than the personhood thing.
They do, and they will. They will eventually concede. Well, whatever you call it, whatever you think it is, and fine, but it's still my body. And so I was having this discussion on a campus not long ago, and it was a girl, and Nick, our producer, got really mad because I kept having the conversation with her for like 15 minutes, and so I've been told it's really hard to cut it down for social media.
We're gonna have to talk about that, Nick.
I just kept asking her a question, because like I just wanted her. I mean, and I did. At the end of it, was at Villanova. I finally got her to like, and she was so upset. She was like, "Fine, it's my property." Like she admitted.
That's great.
The child inside of her. I was like, oh,
that's
great.
a huge win.
And and I know. And I didn't really, I guess maybe I didn't do my job, but I didn't really rebut that, because I was like, oh, okay, well, there's lots of times in history where we thought human beings were property, and that never turned out too well. And then I just stopped the questioning at that point, because I was like, you just made my point for me to everybody else in the audience that you're an idiot.
Right.
But that's what I'm thinking, but not what I'm saying.
Which is good.
But yeah, no, the bodily autonomy thing.
Yeah.
What is your best, I mean, I know there's a sovereign zone and right to refuse. Yep. I've read your trainings.
Nice.
And then there's that up analogy that you use, and there's the violinist, and there's all these different analogies. But it's these conversations I've been having on campuses about bodily autonomy, there's like nothing I can say.
Yeah.
I can prove to them, I can go to Google and show them that the child is a unique whole living child.
Doesn't matter to them.
Doesn't matter.
Because the violinist is not part of you either.
At the end of the day, and I say, well, when I was pregnant with my son, did I have 4 arms?
Yeah, that doesn't matter to them, because that's not what they're saying, right?
No, it's the child is inside of them. The child is physically residing within them. Yeah. That gives them the complete control.
Yeah.
Which is really scary, because I'm like, well, if it's your house, do you have, you wouldn't say, well, I have complete control of the human beings in my house, and if I butchered them and tore them into pieces, that's okay and moral, because it was in my house. Right. So what is your best kind of, how do you handle that conversation with someone who you're really trying to change their mind, not just trying to get a 5-second Facebook video out?
Yeah. So I'm glad you're asking, because like you understand how important this argument is. This is everything. Like, this might be the biggest like tragedy of the pro-life movement, is how much we don't understand how important this argument is to pro-choice people. So, and we've shifted our approach a bit in the last year. Like we want to be innovative and flexible, and we kind of changed our approach on the right to refuse arguments, where it's like where the violinist is and stuff. So we're not doing the cabin in the blizzard thing anymore. We're doing a different thing. So the first thing I'm going to do, no matter what, as soon as they make a bodily rights argument, I'm going to clarify. I'm going to make sure I understand they're making a bodily rights argument. I'm going to ask a question to something like, when you say it's a part of her body or whatever they said, do you mean that it's functionally like a part of her body? Or do you mean that it doesn't matter if it's a person, she can do whatever she wants with anything inside of her body? So I'm just making sure I am understanding them accurately. Make sure they're not a complete idiot. Right. Okay. And almost never, like 1% of the time, are they like, no, I think it's like a kidney. Like almost never. It almost never happens. And so maybe they're not as stupid as we sometimes think. But they don't explain themselves very well.
No, they don't. And their use rhetoric really is super bad vague terminology.
Yes, and that's on them.
Which makes great Facebook videos, by the way.
Yes.
It's so much fun.
So I'm going to get them clarified. And then the first move I'm going to make is I am going to show that their view is inherently extremist. Because young people don't want to see themselves as extremists,
That's right. We're doing a little research at Science for Life on this.
We won't get into all the details.
And Josh has read it.
We won't get into all the details. But we've been using this for years, and we found it to be so effective. Because here's the thing: when someone says grounds their right to an abortion based on a woman's right to do whatever she wants with anything inside of her body, that is inherently an extremist argument. That is more extremist than the pro-life view. Because where is the baby in the third trimester? It's still in her body. So where most pro-choice people, now they've got an internal contradiction in their beliefs.
Yeah.
Most young pro-choice people, they're opposed to late-term abortions. They're opposed to sex selection abortions. But they can't be if their argument is based on she can do what she wants with her body. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show that contradiction. I don't think your view works with itself. Either you can be opposed to late-term abortions like I am, or you stick with your bodily rights argument, because bodily rights arguments are inherently extremist. It means there should be no legal restriction on abortion whatsoever. And then one of two things will happen. Either they will abandon the entire category of pro-choice arguments, which is awesome, and we'll go talk about personhood basically for the rest of the day. That sometimes happens. Yes, I'm glad you brought that up. So sometimes they ping-pong ball back and forth, and you've got to do like a meta thing here. Okay, let's pause. Can we camp somewhere?
I know we almost needed like a whiteboard. Let's follow
You've got
the
two
logical
categories.
part of your argument here.
And I'll let them choose. We'll talk about whatever you want to. But this thing of like we're constantly going back and forth, this isn't going to work. We're not going to make progress. We got to like land somewhere. If you beat me on one of these, we can always jump to the other one, because if you only need one of these to win. So let's just we'll go wherever you want to go.
That's a really good odd.
So
right?
and then they'll go with me. So they'll either abandon it or they will bite the bullet and say, fine, all abortions should be legal. And even then, that's a win for the pro-lifer, because now you force them to bite this bullet. And so we've had cases
bite
where
the bullet, which they're not okay with.
No.
Yeah.
Well, usually not. It kind of depends. But
I've never had somebody walk away from a conversation more pro-abortion, even if they might say it. They feel extremely uncomfortable.
Yeah, so I'll tell you a funny story of what Jacob calls on our staff the worst dialogue he's ever watched. So we were at Aquinas College in Michigan, and with an awesome Students for Life club there, and we're doing outreach. And this girl, it's a Catholic university, but that didn't mean anything. All kinds of pro-choice people. So this girl walks up and she starts off really hostile. She's like, why do you want to control women's bodies? Like, that was basically her opener. And so I kind of diffused it and kind of asked her, let me ask you a few clarification questions. Are you for all abortions, or do you think there should be some restrictions? Like, well, I'm against late-term abortions and stuff. And so I kind of said, well, then why do you want to control women's bodies? Because you're for forcing women to not have late-term abortions, right? She's like, oh, you're right. So then she's like, well, I just really feel like women should have a right to do whatever they want with anything inside of their body. And I said, okay, I'm tracking with you. A lot of pro-choice people say that, but here's the problem, is you're opposed to late-term abortions, but you can't be if that's your reasoning. And for her, the light bulb went on. And she's like, you're right. I can't be for any I should be for all the abortions. Well, I've got to go to class. Goodbye. And she leaves. And I'm like, wait, I wasn't done yet. And Jacob's watching. He's like, wait a minute. Is she more pro-choice now? Like, was that a win? I think he was so angry.
Like negative points for that day.
He was like, that's the worst conversation I've ever seen in my life. He was ranting about it for 5 hours. Okay, so we're driving away, and our team talked about, like, hey, what happened with that girl? Is this a good thing or a bad thing that he walked up to our table? And where our staff landed, I don't know if we convinced Jacob, but at least the rest of the staff landed in this place that led to us writing an article on this called Bodily Rights Arguments Necessitate Extremism, where we said, no, C's better off, and here's why.
Okay.
C walked up to the table with an inconsistent but comfortable pro-choice position.
Yep.
C walked away from our table with a consistent but uncomfortable pro-choice position. C had to walk away going, I just had to say that all abortions are fine to win. That's not good. And hopefully have that experience that you're talking about. Like, you want her leaving like, oh my gosh, that's what I had to say?
Yep.
And she's better off for it. I like what we said in the article, we want to drive the comfortable pro-choice position extinct.
That's right.
So that's the first move.
Okay.
Then kind of the direction that we've been going, especially with right to refuse stuff, is focusing more on direct killing. So, for example, we're making analogies, for example, of like, imagine like a homeless person sneaks onto your boat. You don't know it, but you drive out to sea, and you're 2 miles out into the sea, and then you find out there's this homeless person on your boat. And let's just suppose he's not violent, he's not dangerous, you're not in danger. But he's there, and it's uncomfortable. It's not what you wanted. It seems like here's a case that's like pregnancy. In pregnancy, what's confusing for a lot of pro-choice people is you only have 2 options. You can either help or kill. Whereas in a lot of other scenarios, you can either help or not help or kill, right? Mm-hmm. So if Nick, the producer behind the camera, has a kidney problem and he asks for my kidney, I can either help him by donating my kidney, I can not help him by saying thanks but no thanks, or I can actually like strangle him to death, right? Mm-hmm. Whereas in the boat, like pregnancy, you only have 2 options. You can either help him by letting him be on the boat long enough to get back to shore, or you can throw him into the water. This is not a not help option. This is a kill option. There's no way he's going to survive just out in the open ocean 2 miles away from shore. So we're trying to bring clarity to, unlike in the violinist scenario where it seems like you have a not help option. You just unplug. It's no big deal. It's like, no. You either are directly killing this child, or you can help it. And right now, the only way that we scientifically can help this kid is by letting it be in your body for these 9 months. If at some point we can Star Trek beam the baby somewhere else, I'm fine with that. We just don't have that technology right now. And so that's what we're trying to clarify. And our view, and some pro-life people might disagree with this, but our view has changed on RE486. So where I used to think that RE486 was an indirect killing, I no longer think so. I think all abortions are direct killing.
Wait. You used to think,
Yeah, I used to think
I'm having one of those moments.
It's okay.
This is a stupid person. No, but you're not a stupid person.
So I used to think that chemical abortions was an indirect form of killing because the description that I had been given of how chemical abortions worked was that it was like unplugging, like the violinist. It just unplugs. But then we talked to an embryologist and said, we want to know exactly how an embryo dies that is killed through RE486. He said it suffocates to death. That's the first thing that happens. Okay, that's direct killing. That's like taking a baby out in the ocean and dropping it into the water and saying, well, just like the water killed it. No. You killed it. There was no way. It's like an astronaut on a spacewalk, and you like disconnect it from the space shuttle. Like that's a direct. It might be less direct than like if I beat Nick with a rock or something like that, but it's still direct killing. So that's the direction that we're going. And what's cool is, so I was just hanging out with my new favorite Students for Life club in the entire world, which is the group at St. Olaf College in Minnesota. Okay. They are so good.
I never met this group.
They're fantastic. They're fantastic. Okay. You would love them.
I am into my notes.
Ranting and raving about this club now.
I need to go back to Mall of America.
I know that you know about all the clubs, and I don't know about all the clubs. I'm just saying, from all the clubs I know of, this is now my new favorite club. Okay. And so I was just hanging out with them. And what was cool was they heard about this shift for us in argumentation before we'd published it. So we have a video online on our YouTube channel. It's called like Blood Donation and Abortion. So we're kind of talking directly about what about that blood donation thing. Mm-hmm. And but we told them about it, and they've been using they have watched our course so many times. Doing outreach with them is like standing in a hall of mirrors. I'm surrounded by Josh Brahm clones, and they all use exactly the same wording as us. It's really flattering. But so they'd used Cabin in the Blizzard and De facto Guardian, not everyone's going to know what I mean by that, but like what we used to say.
You have to get Josh's Equip for Life
course.
Yeah, and so a lot of our supporters at one point when it first came out, it donated.
Yeah.
And then other students were just buying it, and so then the group actually can watch it. So you as an individual can get the Equip for Life course,
or a group can get it,
or your group can get it, and you guys can watch it, and it has all these apologetics.
Yeah. So anyone can go to equipcourse.com and get the course. So we had that direction, but now in the last year we've shifted, and they shifted with us. So they do outreach almost every week, like busy dialogue outreaches, which I used to think weekly was too often. On a small campus, 3,000 people on the campus? No. Some people have to see them 8 times before they're willing to stop and talk to them. It's great.
Exactly.
So they said that this new approach has been so much more effective for them than the old approach. So that's really exciting for us because we're trying to continue to revamp and figure out what's working right now. And this kind of
with the extremism approach is what you're talking about. I think that's really, I can't talk too much about some of the research that we're doing, but it's still ongoing. And you've seen fundamentally is millennials, Gen Z, whatever you call a young person in college, they don't want to see themselves as an extremist. And so picking a side or even adopting a label can be seen as a negative thing. And so it's how do you show them that they're actually the extremists?
So in this way, this really plays into our hands. There's other ways where this doesn't play in our hands, but this is a way that we can really use that way of thinking to our advantage. So that's kind of the first several steps that we're taking with bodily rights is we're going to clarify, make sure we're actually talking about bodily rights and not something else. We are going to show that view is inherently extremist. And we're going to be talking about things like direct killing and how...
Do you ever talk about women who are pregnant beyond saying, okay, are you okay with late-term abortion? What about, are you okay with pregnant women shooting up heroin? Has a pregnant woman done anything wrong?
I don't a lot
pregnant
because
women smoking?
What's interesting is that's not always a win for us with the people we're talking to. A lot of the pro-choice people we're talking to don't like those laws. They think it should be legal to at least smoke and maybe drink a little bit. And so we talk about more extreme drugs that have a more extreme effect on the child, like thalidomide and Accutane. Because it's just easier for pro-choice people, their moral compass more aligns with us on What do
you say to someone who says, this was the other thing our team has accused me of, is I don't respond to really stupid people. Usually I just look at the camera and I'm like, there you go. You've just proven your point. But because, what do you say to someone if you get into a bodily autonomy discussion, you bring out the thalidomide example and say, look, this drug, yes, it can reduce your nausea and your queasiness and make you as a woman feel much better. But it can also lead to your child being born without limbs. It's illegal here. Should it not be the case? Should it be legal? Should a woman be able to take thalidomide? Is there anything wrong if she takes...
then they bite the bullet.
When they bite the bullet... What do you say when someone bites the bullet? Do you say, thank you for proving your point and you just converted everybody listening to this? Or do you continue trying to change their mind? Because I think I give up because I'm just thanks for helping convert other people.
We take longer to give up than you do, but it doesn't mean that we never give up. Okay. So let me say something about that first because I think this is really important. So we've got more things that we'll try, and I'll tell you what they are in a second. But I think it's really important, especially just at a self-care level for pro-life, especially young pro-life people, to understand you do not need to talk to someone for as long as they're willing to talk to you. There is a time to end an unproductive conversation. So my favorite quote on this...
Because sometimes those conversations get personal, they get heated, and it's you need to just back away.
Yeah. And so a really a good friend of mine, Jonathan Fincher, once said this thing that I love. He said, Christians often make the mistake of trying to force feed arguments into people's mouths who don't want them. And so it's if people are not in an open place where they are they're in truth-seeking mode instead of fight mode, they're probably not getting helped by this conversation.
That's right, because our model is life is belong, believe, behave. And so it's until you belong, until you kind of like that person talking to you, why the hell are you going to listen to them?
Right.
I mean, that's
exactly.
I know that's the argument I've used. Sometimes people on campuses are like, oh, you could have been nicer about the way I'm like, listen, nothing I was going to say was going to convert that person at the moment as they're screaming at me.
They have to trust you
because
first.
They didn't trust me.
No, you're totally right.
They were all ginned up. The best thing I can do is film them being an idiot and teach everybody else at home. This is how they think. Here's how you can respond. And by the way, don't be afraid because look, I did it. You can, the students who I've groups after I go, they're like, oh man, that was terrible. I'm so glad you did that, not me. I'm like, yeah, but see, now
it's going to be okay.
Tabling on your campus isn't a bad thing, right?
Yeah.
And that seems super easy.
Absolutely, it's the best thing you can do on your campus.
But so it's like knowing what is the purpose.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think it's right. So because if they're all ginned up, they're not going to ever see, I think, light.
So I've got this friend named Tim, not my brother, a different guy, who is an apologist, and he's been helping us on the site, and he was tagging this pro-choice female friend of his on our articles, like a lot, and trying to get her to watch our stuff. And there's this one time he tags her, I don't remember what her name was, but Katie or whatever. It's like, what do you think of this video? And she just finally this long rant about how awful pro-life men are. She didn't watch the thing, but she saw her as a dude on the video. And so she's like, I don't care. These people are awful. This whole thing. And then he texts me. It's like, go get her. That's not exactly what he said, but it's like that kind of, go ahead, Josh, go respond. And I was like, no. I'm not going to, what help am I going to give her? She doesn't know me. She just talked about how she doesn't want to hear from men. You might maybe help her given that you're friends, but probably not. She's not in an open place. If anything, as good as I am at dialogue, I will drive her further from the pro-life movement if I talk to her right now. This isn't the time. So you're right. There's a wisdom thing here of sometimes people aren't in the place where they're in listening mode or truth-seeking mode. And so I will try maybe longer than you sometimes, but it doesn't mean I will never give up. I will sometimes graciously, clearly end the unproductive conversation. I'll thank you for an interesting conversation.
Because you also have to be strategic too. If you're only on campus for 2 hours, do not spend 2 hours talking to one person.
It's hard judgment calls. This is where our motto is every conversation is a series of difficult judgment calls amidst prayer without ceasing. For me, I really favor the quality over quantity thing because it takes at least a half an hour for most people to even start changing their mind.
It's a 15 to 30 minutes.
But you're right in that every conversation you have is a conversation you can't on a college campus, assuming there's more than one person.
Yeah, so time is money.
I'm totally tracking with you.
Changed. Yeah.
So if they bite the bullet on thalidomide,
they say I'm fine with taking a drug, even if it means my fetus will be born without limbs.
I've got 2 more things I will try before I give up. The first thing I will do is I will tweak the thalidomide thing. So the original idea of using thalidomide is not our idea. Dr. Rich Papard, who's worked a lot with Scott Kluisendorf, first came up with that. He's this brilliant oral surgeon in Michigan. So he first came up with that. So that idea of she's got morning sickness. What if she wanted to take thalidomide for morning sickness? Wouldn't that be wrong? Most pro-choice people bite that bullet, which is interesting, right? But they do. So So my brother Tim came up with a more explosive bullet to bite, if you will, a version of that where what if she was taking thalidomide not to help her morning sickness, but to intentionally deform her child? So we always be clear. This is not what we think pro-choice people are like. This is not what we like or how we're projecting onto women who have abortions. It's a thought experiment. Imagine a woman who, for whatever horrible reason, intentionally wanted to deform her child. Maybe she wants the kudos from her friends who are like, oh, you're a hero mom because you've got a special needs kid. Whatever it is.
Disability.
Whatever it is. If she did that is a harder bullet for pro-choice people to bite because it just seems really wrong to do that on purpose to a kid. But then they're in the uncomfortable position of sort of arguing that a child is owed arms and legs, but they're defending dismemberment abortion. And so we're going to make that point clear. If they bite that bullet, I've got one more thing I'll try, but it's always the last resort. And I always say that because sometimes when pro-life people hear really powerful thought experiments, they get really excited, oh, I can't wait for some sucker to say this so I can use this. And this is seriously last resort because this would be super weird and aggressive to make this your first talking point. But it's my last resort. We call this Tim's really dark story because it's a really dark story. So this is also me kind of warning the audience. I'm going to tell a really horrible thought experiment. So if you're squeamish, then skip forward by about a minute. But imagine a couple, they've been wanting to get pregnant for a long time. They finally get pregnant. They're really excited. The guy is going to all the appointments and the ultrasounds. They've picked the name, he's super involved, super just in love with their baby girl. And then the wife finds, as he discovers, that the husband's been cheating on her. He's got a sex addiction thing going on. And so she's completely she's angry and upset and all the different things reasonably that people would feel. But she actually takes it to the level she wants to get revenge on him. And she decides the best way to make him feel like she feels is to not hurt him, but to hurt their child. And so she finds a doctor willing to torture her unborn child, in the 3rd trimester. And I don't even have to describe. the things that you could theoretically do
That's
to an unborn
abortion,
child.
but yeah.
Without killing it.
Without killing
imagine
it.
she's going back
torture,
on daily appointments, right? Like, it's just really, really gruesome and horrible. Like, almost no, it's like our question for the pro-choice person, is there any one thing that she should not be legally allowed to do to this child? If so, then the idea that she can do whatever she wants with anything inside of her body is not true. And that's what we're trying to show. Like, aren't there some limits to bodily autonomy? Like, I'm not an anti-bodily autonomy guy. I am generally very for women having the right to do generally what they want with their bodies, with few exceptions. I think this is one of these weird cases where for the government to try to protect vulnerable, innocent people, we have to tell women that they kind of have to not kill the thing that's inside of them. But, like, most pro-choice people have a really hard time biting the bullet on that. So that'll be our last attempt.
Did you ever have anyone bite the bullet on that?
Occasionally. It's like, really rare.
You're like, okay, Satan, bye-bye. I was like,
I don't call him Satan, but yeah. But I will basically say, and we try to do this more now than we used to. I've been trying to get more intentional about this, is when I end the conversation,
I'm bringing that up on campus. I'm totally going to bring that up on campus.
When they've bit every bullet, I'm like, I just want to make clear, I think we have found our big disagreement. Like, you believe that it should be legal to literally torture babies in the womb, and I don't. And because I can't get you to agree with me on that, like, I don't think I'm going to get you to agree on abortion. Like, I think we have found our stopping point, because I don't know where else we can go. But just to be clear, here's why we disagree. It's like, you're saying that it's okay to kill newborns, and I'm opposed to that. And so naturally we disagree about abortion. But, like, we're being really clear about that. If you ever change your mind about infanticide, you should rethink your position about abortion, because I think that's the only reason that we disagree, is because you're not even with me on newborns, like that kind of thing. I'm being really clear. Here's where we disagree. Thanks for the conversation. I'm going to talk to someone else now, like that kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's important, too, to know, especially if you're just starting out to have these kind of discussions with friends or family. You're not going to convert everybody. And there are going to be some people who are going to bite the bullet all the way into that point of saying, if she wants to repeatedly torture the 9-month child within her, that's totally fine.
And it doesn't mean they really believe that.
No.
A lot of time what's going on is they feel cornered.
They do.
You've successfully cornered them. And most people, unfortunately, are not in open-minded truth-seeking mode. They're in fight mode. And so they don't want to lose. And so they'll just say whatever they've got to say to feel like they didn't lose. But then again, fine. I just want them to walk away. Like, oh my gosh, that's what I had to say to win? Like, that's not good. Like, that's the phenomenological experience I want them to have.
You have to think of it, too, as like you've planted that seed, right? And you don't know when that seed's going to be harvested and that fruit's going to be kind of plucked off that vine. Exactly. But you have to think about it as you're planting seed. That's why you also don't say, okay, Satan, when they walk away.
Exactly.
You've really just tarnish that seed.
Exactly. I don't want to spoil what I've done. I want to be so likable.
And I think that's hard for pro-lifers too sometimes, because like they've taken these idiotic positions, these heinous positions, and you also have to be nice to them, because you want them at the end of the day when they go back to their dorm room, they go back to their car, to rethink and replay that discussion they've had with you and be like, oh my gosh, that does sound illogical, or that sounds
you nailed
horrible.
it when you talked about like the likability thing. They have to almost want to become like you. For them to want to be like, they have to want to become pro-life. Apologetics, I think, is just removing the hurdles. I think of hurdles on a racetrack. What about back alley abortions? Ooh, good question. Let's take care of that. Yes. What about bodily rights? Ooh, I'm glad. Let's take care of that. Let's get that off the track. And get to the point where they actually just want to become pro-life. And so given that, there's this thing where like sometimes I want to, like, absolutely, like I have an inner snark guy, an inner, like a person who wants to like act and talk like Ben Shapiro or Jordan Peterson or whoever, like the people that just like have those amazing drop the mic moments. I get that. I love watching those videos because we all like that, but I don't want to get in my own way. And like what I care about is this person actually one day changing their mind. And so much of what we're doing is like we're giving them maybe their first experience with a loving, kind, pro-life person who also was smart.
Yeah,
and then that's going to have
it's interesting in some of the research that I can't mention, but it was interesting that the interviews that we did in the first half, every woman who kind of had a negative, they all had negative views of the pro-life movement, but they'd all kind of seen something on the sidewalk. Yeah. They've all seen a certain type of outreach out the sidewalk. Yeah. And that was it sticks in their minds. Of who pro-life is, what pro-life is all about.
Yeah.
Regardless of whether or not the person was shouting or saying anything. Maybe the person was just silently standing there holding that. But that was the thing that like, it was really, really interesting.
Yeah.
That was the thing of I can never be part of that.
It's a picture that
I
sticks
can
in the
never
mind.
be part of the pro-life movement. Even if I might have sympathies or agree with a lot of their positions, I would never call myself pro-life because that's pro-life and I'm not that.
Right.
And so and we're going to talk about that in an upcoming episode as well, about getting kind of more inside the mind of the pro-choice person's head.
Yeah.
But I think that's really interesting for us to be thinking about, because a lot of our movement is, this is a sales job. This is a marketing job, right?
And it's psychological too. Like, this is why I'm getting more into learning about psychology than even philosophy, because so much of persuasion is psychological.
I know,
not
because
just
people
logical.
will take, philosophical stands that don't make sense, that are inconsistent, and they're okay with that. I mean, we've had students on campus say, well, yeah, I know what I just said is philosophically inconsistent, but I'm okay living in a paradox.
Yeah. It's like, what do you do with that?
Yeah, I don't know what to do with those.
You have to wait for them to, at some point, want consistency. So, here's the hope. If I can offer hope.
Thank you.
So think of, I don't know if you've been following the story of Megan Phelps Roper. She's one of the people who left Westboro Baptist Church.
No.
Okay, so this is amazing. So, so she's done it. She's got a great TED Talk. She just put out a book. So she grew up in Westboro Baptist Church. This is that little awful, tiny little quote-unquote church that God hates, those horrible signs. And they protest military funerals and think it's great when soldiers die because that's God's judgment on America for allowing gay marriage and stuff like that. Okay, so she grows up in that church. Now, she's not, a lot of the grandkids who grew up in that church became lawyers. They're like free speech lawyers. That's how they do their cases. They have their own lawyers on staff, basically. But not Megan. Megan became their social media person. They have Twitter. Can you believe Westboro Baptist Church has Twitter? I can't believe it. And they're like on there, like posting their snarky memes.
So you can have Twitter too.
Yeah, and if they can do Twitter, anyone can do Twitter.
Okay.
So she's on Twitter, and of course, like 99% of what they got was hate. But a couple of really smart people started showing inconsistencies between the Bible and what they would do. They would ask questions like, hey, when the Bible says love your enemies, and then you guys are saying that that you're happy when people die in the war in Afghanistan, like, how does that work? And so then she would go to her mom, like, Mom, I don't know what to say about this argument. And she said that, as she later said, her mom's responses were so lame and dismissive that suddenly she had this growing, like, horror. She literally described being horrified, realizing she had internally contradictory beliefs that she was holding at the same time. And she said, the reason I was able to do that was I never thought about both at the same time. And then suddenly, once she thought about both at the same time, she was like, oh my gosh, I need to do something about this. And she ultimately left the church. She married one of the guys from Twitter. It's just a really amazing story. And so ultimately, I don't think young people are going to forever be able to live with the idea of, hey, I believe like multiple things that like don't work at the same time. Like, I think sometimes they're just saying that to you because, again, they don't want to show weakness or something like that, which is super lame, but yeah.
Okay. All right. So before we run out of time, I want to do one more argument, but I want to tell me what you think is a new argument that you were hearing kind of coming up that you think pro-lifers...
From pro-choice side?
Yeah, so what's a good pro-choice argument that you've been hearing a lot on campuses that you think we need to know better, how to better respond? I mean, we hear rape, we hear life of the mother, we hear back alley abortions.
Yeah.
I really never heard a lot of the burning IVF clinic one, although
that came up a lot like a year ago because there was this one like tweet thread went viral, and so suddenly everyone thought they heard this argument for the first time. It's like 10 years old.
I know.
So that was the thing that's kind of gone away again. Okay, so I'll tell you a big one that's coming up more for us, but we are still developing more responses to it. And so, like, there's some part of me that's like, I almost like shouldn't get into this because I know it's going to get better. But I'll kind of give you a sense of the direction that we're going. That's the point
of like, well, do what we do, because we put ourselves out there. Then everyone tells us how we stink and how to get better.
I'm kind of putting myself out there because we have not finished developing our work on this. But I think the best pro-choice argument is something like, abortion is like kind of like pre-self-defense, that pregnancy is inherently dangerous because some percentage of people will die in abortion, and even a much bigger percentage of people have some negative physical aftermath or effect of pregnancy. And so abortion is sort of like a self-defense kind of thing against that. And so, and there's a lot of interesting directions this argument can go, but we're hearing it so much more often. We were aware of this argument years ago, and we were actually not talking about it publicly because we didn't want pro-choice people using it because it's actually really powerful. And now it's just exploded. We're seeing it all over the place, and we're like, it's so frustrating. So this is one of the big things our philosophy team is working on right now. But one of the things we're saying, and I did just talk to someone at St. Olaf about this, a pro-choice student there, was, okay, the maternal mortality statistics, like the best maternal mortality stats we have, and like in America, maternal mortality is like 0.014%.
And they're not and it's not good when talking about abortion and because they're not compared. They're not right.
So you got to find out, like, what do you mean by maternal mortality? Are you including abortion stats or not?
Yes, because they're actually, I think it's included in the denominator, but not always. Yeah, it's including the bottom number, but not the top number, because if she dies during the abortion, it's included as a death. Yeah. But if she has a complete, it's really interesting.
So my philosophy team is the one who's researched and come up with the number, and I'm assuming they've come up with the right number. Let's just assume, for sake of argument, is 0.014%. That is far less dangerous than other medical procedures that are considered extremely safe. So it is just not, like, intellectually honest to call pregnancy a thing that maybe has a 0.014% chance of a complication, or maybe a 0.0014%, one of the two. That, like, it's just weird to call that dangerous when there's things that are so much more risky but are considered safe situations. So that's one of the directions that we're going. It's not the only direction we're going, but that's like part of it.
The one thing I saw is it's not apples to oranges when they talk about abortion deaths versus maternal mortality, because it's like if you die during abortion, it's counted against maternal mortality. But if you don't die during abortion, it aren't including those numbers. And
then, it depends on how they're counting it. And that's right. And the devil's in the details here. And you've got to, and this is where you've got to push them. So I haven't told the story before, but at St. Olaf, so that girl I was talking to, she pulled this really lame move on me and only admitted it toward the end. So she was quoting this fact to me. She said, I read a study that said that 30% of women who ever die, their cause of death can be linked to a previous pregnancy. And I was like, I don't think that's true. That sounds really, really high to me. She's like, no, I really read it. I'm like, here's my email address. Please send me this article. I would love to see this. She's like, no, but it's really true. Finally, by the end, because I was like, I've heard 0.014. There's a really big difference, right?
Between 30
so
and
naturally, we feel differently. Like that would explain, right? Reasonable people could react differently given that we're working from different stats. By the end of the conversation, she admits, she's like, okay, well, actually, now that I think of it, I don't think it was actually 30%. I think it was 2 or 3%. I was like, wait a minute. You exaggerated by 10 to 15x in this. I actually wasn't hard enough on her. I should have pulled a Ben Shapiro at this point and been like, are you kidding me? I didn't. I was too nice. But, like, you've got to ask. Like, when you bring up what are you talking about? What studies are you talking about? Because there's a lot of bogus studies going around.
Yeah, I mean, there was that whole, like, Texas study on maternal mortality that they found, they did their math wrong, and it was like a year later that they finally kind of like quietly corrected it. But meanwhile, it's still like mentioned in the New York Times and NPR and all those places. It's crazy. But you are hearing
that's fake news.
I haven't heard the self-defense thing, but you are hearing more maternal mortality.
Yep.
And by the way, the Trump administration just passed some sort of resolution that they're actually sending in like tens of millions of dollars into rural and urban communities to try to fight the Black maternal mortality rate because it's African American who are actually suffering, and it's overall it's a public health crisis.
I'm all for that. Obviously we want fewer people to die.
Super excited when I say, well, you can thank the Trump administration for doing that.
Yeah, we do.
Everyone really loves me when I say that. So
especially on college campuses.
Yeah, no, that's interesting, and I'm glad you brought that up because I think we are going to hear that more maternal mortality.
We will.
And the abortion is, and that I think actually the abortionist for the St. Louis Planned Parenthood, I Capitol Hill a couple of weeks ago actually was making those arguments.
Yeah,
like,
abortion practitioners use this a lot.
Oh, yeah. Yep. Our procedure is safer than it's safer for her to have an abortion. Related to that idea,
but they're getting better. It's getting more nuanced. It's like when Thompson went from sovereign zone, you can do whatever you want, to like the violinist. It's nuanced. Like you can at least do certain things with your body. Like this is that direction. Pro-choice people are getting so much better at making this argument. So as we continue developing with our team, we're going to keep on putting stuff out about helpful videos and articles about this. So follow us for that. But yeah, we're still working on it. It's really interesting.
Make sure you follow Equal Rights Institute on social media, and then you get the Equipped for Life course. Yep. You can sign up. They have a email list, and you do your own podcast, right?
We have 2 podcasts now, and
he has 2 podcasts.
And
He's
we're
kicking my
finally
ass.
Getting more into YouTube.
Okay.
Yeah, it's fun.
Yeah, so, and then Josh, you'll see him at a lot of our Students for Life trainings. They train a bunch of Students for Life leaders.
We do webinars all the time now.
Webinars together. So make sure next time you see Josh's face or ERI that you subscribe, so you can be, in the know when the philosophers have figured out the best way to handle this. But thanks for coming on today for
Explicitly Pro-Life.
I appreciate it.
It was fun.